perhaps the discussion we're having is the difference between media, which is how information gets out, and journalists and responsible journalism. So I just want to make that observation.
Do you think that the loyal opposition, because we have a two-party government, do you think that it's easier for the minority party to slip into obstructionism, or do you think that that would happen no matter how many political parties there were?
Well, it's definitely easier because for the minority party to speak out and block something, because if we had three parties, then the majority would be much larger because they would have to compromise and two parties would have to be in support of something. So the minority wouldn't be as large and wouldn't have as much of a great influence.
Comment on the Tea Party and what it might have to do with our topic, if anything, of loyal opposition.
I think the Tea Party exemplifies the concept of loyal opposition. It's a group of people getting together and saying that they disagree with what the government's doing. They're peacefully kind of protesting that. And they're trying to hold those in the majority accountable for their actions. So I think this really exemplifies the concept of loyal opposition because they're remaining loyal to their country but expressing their viewpoints in hopes of making the country a better place.
I agree with Alan, and the Tea Party is mostly just focusing on the issue of money, and so if they're just focusing on a single issue rather than just a large issue, then it's much easier to be loyal opposition and come to a compromise on a single issue rather than many issues.
I'm gonna.
I thought your prepared remarks were well organized. I thought it was a nice sampling of over time and space of your initial examples to show that you were applying the concept over a period of time and could find examples in various corners. I thought that was effectively done. But then you went on to the substance, which was loyal opposition. And especially, I think what you emphasized in your prepared remarks was the role of the loyal opposition and the historical background. You gave examples of those. It would have been also good to have perhaps gone into what fundamental principles it has to attach to, because there's a lot of buzzwords in that quote, and I think that would have helped to solidify how you thought the loyal opposition, how it needs to attach to what principles, what fundamental principles, and that would have helped to tie a little bit of that together. You were clearly, you have opinions on all of it, and were responsive to our questions. It isn't absolutely necessary in a big class like this that everybody has something to say on each one if you think you've covered it, but mostly when you added something, it did add a little nuance. So you did a good job.
Yeah, I concur. I thought you did a very good job. I like the idea of, I mean, admittedly kind of broad principles, but the idea of opposing each other without opposing the country, I think is a kind of a good way of summarizing this. Now, there are obviously some things that could be teased out, but you know, left to my own devices, I would have quoted Jim Wright, former Speaker of the House, who's still alive and kicking, and I see him about once a year. And every time I see him, he talks about that he grew up in an era of politics where you could disagree without being disagreeable. And that's part, it seems to me, of what we're talking about. Part of it is stylistic, but something deeper than that. And as you point out, sticking to your ideological principles. Had we had more time, I would have wanted to explore the difference between the filibuster and, quote, creative legislative maneuvering, unquote. Some of us might have thought those were synonymous, but maybe they're not, and I don't know about that. I also would have liked to have more time to talk about the the individual and what the individual's responsibility is in this, because you talk about people reading newspapers and going out and using websites and stuff like that, when in fact the evidence is they may go to ones they agree with, but they're not out there doing that kind of honest search for information. The other thing I will take away from me, as I mentioned, I teach at Clemson University, the home of the Strom Thurmond Institute, and I will go back and report that people were waxing nostalgic about good old Strom standing up and talking about releasing the recipes or whatever he talked about, reading the phone book. We seldom do that at Clemson, but then there are some people that are not sure he's dead yet. So. But you did a very good job, represented Oregon extremely well.
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said before me, and I have to compliment this team with helping me take away some very clear ideas about where you stood. Drawing a line between doing something for the good of one's own party versus the good of the country. I think this is a really important distinction and a criterion for evaluating whether the behavior of a political actor is obstructionism or just loyal opposition. And I think this notion, the common good, also shows to me that you're drawing in ideas from all the other units too, because I think that's an important philosophical common theme, civic virtue and classical republicanism and all those concepts that you learn about in the other units. It's nice to see that thinking cross-pollinate. And also, it's an important but an obvious statement that the people rule through voting. And, so at a certain point, the opposition has to give up and say, all right, we've had our say, we didn't get our way, but there's an election coming and we'll wait for that instead of continuing to overheat the rhetoric and some of these groups on the fringe talking about violence and new militias. And, I think if everyone in America was using the criteria that you've set forth in very clear terms to evaluate the state of political discourse today, we'd be in a lot better shape. But I am optimistic knowing that after this competition, you're still going to keep at it as citizens, and I wish you luck in doing that, and I congratulate you for a really nice presentation today.